If you're looking to add some Irish books to your TBR, these are my personal recommendations. Hi, welcome, come on in. My name is Aoife and today I'm going to take you through all of the books that I loved last year that were written by Irish authors. There is a pretty good mix in here. There's some contemporary fiction, there is some historical fiction, there's some non-fiction, and of course, because it's me, there's a couple of romances thrown in here for some good measure too. I really hope that you're going to enjoy these books just as much as I did. First one on the list is one of the non-fiction books, and it's Did You Hear Mammy Died by Seamus O'Reilly. Seamus is a journalist working in Ireland, and this is Seamus's memoir written as a kind of a throwback to the time that his mother passed away from breast cancer. Seamus was 6 when his mother passed away, and the title of the book comes from him standing at the door to the house as the wake was happening. A wake is held in Ireland after a person dies, where their body is laid out, everyone can come and pay their respects. Then you have some tea and some food with the family. Everybody comes together to share some memories, some happy stories of the person who's just passed away, and to comfort and to grieve with the family. At this aforementioned wake, Seamus was standing at the front door and greeting everybody who came in with the phrase, "Did you hear Mammy died?" This kind of lightened the mood of what was a pretty bleak time for everybody, and Seamus thought that would be the perfect title for his memoir. What makes this a very gripping read is that Seamus is one of the youngest children of 11. So he has 10 siblings who were also all living in the home at the time. I think at the time of their mother's death, the eldest was maybe 16, 17, right down to a 3-year-old. So this means that Seamus's father was now left fully and solely in charge of 11 children, all under the age of 18. There are some pretty poignant chapters in this book. I especially loved reading the chapters about Seamus's family pets, about the dogs that they had had throughout the years. There are also some really lovely look backs at Seamus's time with his mother and what he can remember. I'm sure that you'll know from your own stage, when you're 6 years old, you don't really remember a lot of what's going on. You're kind of told these stories from other people who were there, who shared the experience with you. And I have a feeling that as he was talking with his siblings or with his father or with other family members or friends, to learn more about his mother before her passing, I am pretty sure that it was a wonderful experience writing the book for him. Of course, this is also quite a poignant read, so do be aware of that and do bring tissues when you're going into this book, because this one will make you cry. Next up was a debut novel that I absolutely adored, and it was One Night Only by Catherine Walsh. This book features one of my highlights of the Irish social calendar, a wedding. But one thing that I will say is that I wish the wedding had been a little bit more prominent in the story. You do get to see aspects of an Irish wedding. You do get to see some things that we would do in our Irish wedding ceremonies and traditions and what happens at the after party. But I also do feel like this could have been extended out a little bit more, especially because it was so prominent on the blurb. In this book, you're following Sarah, who is on her way from where she grew up in New York to Ireland for her best friend's wedding. Her best friend is getting married to an Irish man. She's never been to Ireland before. She's also never been to an Irish wedding before. But she is so excited to see all of the green fields that Ireland is known about, all of the traditions and customs, and also this Céad Míle Fáilte, 100,000 welcomes that we're so well known for across the world. The problem is that Sarah gets to the wedding and instantly realizes that she recognizes the best man. He's Declan Murphy, he's the brother of the groom, and he's also the guy that Sarah kicked out of her apartment just hours before she got on the plane to Dublin. Sarah then, after the wedding, heads back to New York, tries to get back into her life as an architect, but she realizes she can't get Declan out of her mind, and she does start to see him pop up in places that she's not expecting him to. There was a lot that I loved about this book. Like I've said, I love that it showed the Irish traditions, the Irish culture, the Irish warmth that we're all so well known for. But there were a couple of things that I didn't love here. There is a workplace romance between Sarah and Matthias, who is one of her co-workers, but I didn't particularly love A, how that was done, and B, the outcome here. I do like watching an office romance, but I don't think this is the one that I was hoping for. This was such a phenomenal debut, and I also have a copy of The Rebound, which is Catherine's second book and just came out in February just gone. I cannot wait to finally read that one and see if I enjoy it just as much as I did One Night Only. 2021 was the year that I discovered one of Ireland's biggest and best known authors. And I'm kind of kicking myself that it took me almost 30 years to pick up one of their books. For the Irish Readathon, which is held every March, I read Circle of Friends by Maeve Binchy, and I fell just completely in love with it. She was a phenomenal writer. Her storytelling was immense, and she really immersed me into the world of Benny and Eve. Unfortunately, Maeve passed away in 2012, so there won't be any new books of hers coming out. But I do have the pleasure of having every single book on her back catalogue that I can go through. In this book, you're following Benny and Eve, who've been best friends since they were about 10 years old. And it starts out as they're 10 years old, playing in the schoolyard, and then you're kind of brought on a time jump forward to when they're 18 years old. Benny is about to leave their small suburb and head into the big city for the first time to attend UCD. Eve was brought up by the local nuns, having been abandoned by her parents when she was a baby. So she isn't given the same opportunities in life that Benny has been given and won't be going into university. She's actually going to be doing a secretarial course to go straight into the workplace. However, on the first day of Benny's classes, while Eve is up there visiting her and finding out how life is going for one of her best friends, Benny and Eve are witnesses to a fatal accident, and through this, Eve is somehow given a chance to also attend university. So while they're there, they meet a whole new set of people from totally different backgrounds to themselves, quite well-to-do people who are coming from very working class backgrounds. And something that I really loved about this book is how it commentates on these social differences throughout Ireland, especially when it's set in the 1950s. Something that I also loved about this book is that it feels quite timeless. As I just said, it's set in the 1950s, but you couldn't necessarily say that it's also set in the 1990s or set in the 1980s. It doesn't feel like it's set in the 1950s. There's nothing that really points it out as set back then. And all of the experiences, everything that the girls and their friends are going through are very common things that are happening to people in the current moment. So this book is a particularly could be read at any time book. Have you ever read a book that was so good you just could not put it down? That's what I found in A Keeper by Graham Norton. I distinctly remember being on reading sprints with, I believe, my friend Karis from Karis's Corner. I picked this book up kind of as a whim. I had bought it in the huge Mayasha in Cologne on a day trip, but I think I just picked this one up because I liked the sound of what was on the blurb. Didn't really think too much of it, but I said on the live, I just needed something that I was going to get kind of engrossed in. I was going to give this one a try. I could not put this book down. I think when we came off the live, I maybe had like 30 pages left, and I just kept going and sped right through those. In this book, you're following Elizabeth, who has just lost her mother back in Ireland. So she heads back to Ireland from where she's living in New York to kind of get her mother's affairs in order, and she can sell up the house then. While she's going through all her mother's belongings to decide what she can sell and what she's going to throw out, she comes across a bunch of letters that are written between her mother and her father. Elizabeth had never known her father, and these letters are kind of painting him in a decreasingly positive light. We'll say it like that. Then you also go back in time 40 years, and a woman has just clambered out of a house in a very rural area of Ireland with absolutely no idea where she is, no idea how she has gotten there, and has got very few memories of what has happened to her in the time that she's been in the house. I was absolutely gripped by this book, so much so that I went out and immediately bought Homestretch, another one of Graham Norton's books, and I will hopefully be getting to that one this month. Another non-fiction book that I really enjoyed in 2021 by an Irish author was Mindful by Dermot Whelan. Dermot is a radio presenter and comedian in Ireland. He presents the Dermot and Dave show with his best friend Dave Moore at 9 o'clock week mornings on Today FM. The change in Dermot's life that brought around this book is that he also works as a comedian. And when he was at the Kilkenny Cat Laughs, which is an annual comedy festival in Kilkenny, he had a panic attack that was so severe he was actually put into an ambulance because of it. He realised that the way that he was living his life was completely unsustainable and that he was very much going to hit a brick wall if he continued. So he decided to turn to mindfulness and see if that would help him in any way. Turns out it really did, and he became a mindfulness teacher and also put together this book. So it has lots of tips for how to recenter yourself, how to kind of focus your thinking on something else rather than what's running through your mind at the moment if you want to get away from a negative thought train. This is a really great introduction to mindfulness for people who've never really taken the topic any interest before, who've never particularly done any of it before. I listened to the audiobook of this, which I think was a really great decision to do because there are some meditations and mindfulness moments set throughout the book, and Dermot guides you through them orally while you're listening to the book, and I think that was such a great way to experience it. It's definitely one that I would recommend as an audiobook. Another non-fiction book that was one of the favourite Irish books that I read last year was A Light That Never Goes Out by Keelan Shanley. Keelan was a journalist working in Ireland, and her career evolved to the part that she was working as an anchor on our main evening news at 6 p.m. However, Keelan was diagnosed with breast cancer, and this book chronicles what her life was like leading up to her employment as a news anchor, but also her diagnosis, how she took the news, her treatments, what she did to kind of steady herself when everything was getting a bit too much. When she passed away, her husband Connor also finished out the book for her. I am somebody who has had breast cancer affect a family member, and that made this a little bit more of a connection for me. Hearing from Keelan what they've gone through, what the situation is like for them, how kind of isolating it can sometimes feel, how heavy the burden can sometimes feel. It really did give me a deeper insight into what life was like for the family member that had been diagnosed. Luckily, they're still with us, but it has given me more of an opportunity to discuss it with them, to ask how things are going, and I'm really glad that it has opened that opportunity for me. So let's go on to two YA books that I absolutely loved, the first of which being Not My Problem by Kira Smith. This is Kira's second book, and I read her debut, The Falling in Love montage, in October of 2020, I believe, and I absolutely adored it. So I did have quite high expectations for Not My Problem, and thankfully these were met tenfold. Aideen is a secondary school student, and her life is not particularly going super well. Her mother has a drinking problem, which is starting to become a little bit of a concern. She's starting to run out of reasons why she can't take part in PE at the moment, and she can feel that her best friend is starting to pull away from her. Maeve is one of her classmates and seems to have the absolute perfect life. However, things are a little bit more trepidatious at home than Aideen is initially thinking. Maeve feels like she has too many problems that are all kind of bounding upon her at the same time, so Aideen comes up with the solution to help Maeve come over some of them. She's going to push her down the stairs. Maeve's problem is then kind of solved because it does take a couple of things off of her schedule, but people start hearing that this is what happened and come to Aideen for help to solve their own problems. I absolutely adored this book. Like I said before, there is a parent here who is suffering from alcoholism, but I thought that this was written so well. It was clearly well researched. It was given quite a lot of care and attention that it deserved. There is also a sapphic romance in this book, and it's quite the slow burn romance, so if that's something that really floats your boat, you are going to absolutely adore that part of this book too. The other YA book that I absolutely loved last year was a YA debut, The Henna Wars by Adiba Jagidar. This book is again set in a school, and we're following Nishat, who has just come out to her Muslim parents, and they haven't particularly taken the news quite well. In Nishat's school, they are running a kind of a business project where everyone comes up with an idea and then tries to make some money from selling products, and the product that makes the most money will win some kind of a prize at the end of the school fair. This is something that happens in quite a lot of schools when you're in a specific year in secondary school, so that instantly was a big connection for me because I also did the same product when I was in transition year in school. Nishat decides that her project is going to be doing henna tattoos, which is a really great way for her to connect her Bangladeshi culture with the new life that she and her parents have set up in Ireland. However, there's a new girl that has just arrived at the school, Flavia, who was also at a wedding that Nishat was at recently and has seen henna being done and decides she's going to also take on this project. And so the titular Henna Wars begin as the two girls set up their kind of rival companies and try to gather the most customers and have the best designs and also win the most money. I like that this book tackled quite a lot of heavy topics but did them so phenomenally well. There were discussions about Islamophobia, homophobia, especially the kind that can come from your family and people that you trust and hope would love you unconditionally. There are also some discussions of coming out, there are discussions of bullying and also of cultural appropriation and what is the difference and the fine line between cultural appreciation and cultural appropriation and where does the distinguish lie. There is also a sapphic romance in this book, and I really liked how that one was done, especially because one of the date areas that Nishat and Flavia went to, Gino's Gelato in Dublin, is also somewhere that I had been on a date while I was living in Dublin. So just even seeing that was such a lovely connection to this book. This book also features a really lovely sisterly relationship between Nishat and her sister Priti, which I absolutely loved reading. So if you're also big on books that have a big kind of familial feeling, this is definitely one for you. So finally, we go on to a kind of reread. I tried to read this book in German. I really tried. And then I think about 100 pages in, I just had to throw in the towel because I think I picked the wrong book to try and read in German for the first time. This book is very Irish centric. A lot of the slang that's used is very Irish centric. So trying to translate that for a different audience probably just didn't work out. But the book was, oh my god, what a complete Ashling by Sarah Breen and Emer McLysett. This is the first book in the Ashling series. This book follows Ashling, who is quite a small town country girl. She's been with her boyfriend John for years and years, and everybody is starting to ask that question you always start asking for a long-term relationship. When is there going to be a ring? Ashling and John go on a week away, and every place they go, every tour they're on, Ashling is expecting him to get down on one knee, but it never happens. So when they get back home to Ireland, Ashling breaks things off with him and starts heading off on an adventure to Dublin to kind of have a little bit of a break for herself. I absolutely adore Ashling. She's one of my favourite characters, especially from her origin days on the Facebook group that Sarah and Emer had set up when they were students in Dublin. There's a lot that I can connect with Ashling on. We have very similar backgrounds, we have very similar education, we have very similar family setups, and this book was really just such a connection to home in the month that I needed it the most. There are also some slightly heavy topics, one of which I believe is mirrored on Emer McLysett's life. It's such a heartbreaking topic to read, but it was written so well. I have got the other books that are in the series at the moment. I have read the second and third book, but I've got the fourth book still sitting on my TBR. And maybe it's time to read 2 and 3 again before I start into the fourth book. Those are all of the books by Irish authors that I loved the most in 2021. What was your favourite book written by an Irish author? Don't forget to like and subscribe because I have new videos up every week. Now, get on out of here.